Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to my channel, Chien-Pao. Let's talk about it, and why is it underperforming with Iron Hands? This deck was I to be the BDIF in the Pirates format, the best user of Iron Hands, the way to really fix some of its matchups, but why is it absolutely fumbled at the races and not be performing as well? So in today's video, we're going to break down the rise and fall of the early sort of Pirates Reformer, talking about Chien-Pao Iron Hands, talking about how it's been performing overall, where it has to go to kind of potentially bounce back to be where it was once before, where it was one of the strongest decks in the format and the most fun deck to play as well. So if we go into the start of the Pirates Reformer, it was I to be the BDIF, the best user of Iron Hands. It fixed a ton of the issues like the Greninja combo it had to get. Greninja combo, you need to have the Greninja, the bench space, you also need to get the 3 energy, then you need to get the cross switches, and then you need to get the cancelling clone, then you get 2 prizes that way. Whereas Iron Hands was just Iron Hands, taps lightning for turn, taps 3 energy, and all of a sudden, bingo, bango, bongo, that single prize Pokemon has now become a 2 prize Pokemon. And Path was looking to be a lot less popular. Decks like Miraidon was focusing more on going for Turbo Iron Hands, the likes of Giratina was definitely more popular, but a lot of people weren't playing it as often. And Mew, with only really playing 1 or 2 Path build, the Fusion build looked like it was going to be the much stronger version. So Path was honestly looking to be very, very favourable. So Chien-Pao is going to be very, very well positioned. But if we look at the results right now, it's a very, very easy telling sign. If we look at the last format, the Obsidian Flames to and 151 format, we can see it got a couple top, we've got one top 4, couple top 8, couple top 16, and a ton of top 32s and top 64s. So doing incredibly well, very, very well poised. But if we just look at Paradox Rift, yes, I know we've had a lot less tournaments as well, but it's had 1 top 16, 1 top 32, and 4 top 64s. Only 2 of those results, 1 top 32 and 1 top 64, were outside of LAIC. So this deck was really poised to do incredibly well, but it just has absolutely fumbled and not done that well at all. Why is that case? But that also isn't just the case for us. It also is the case in Japan. Started as format, it was about 12.5% of the meta share. Very, very, very high. But its current ranking right now is about 3%. Had a huge fall by nearly 10% of the metagame. And if you think about the Heavenly Kings, the Elite Four Championships, 50% of the archetypes were played was Chien-Pao, and 3 of them were the Iron Hands build. So we're saying that 8 of the top best players over in Japan had huge faith that Chien-Pao Iron Hands was going to be the BDIF. But why has it come to fall? Well, can it not keep up in a best of 1 format there in Japan? And there are still very, very high counts of Roaring Moon, as well as also Lost Tina, which can be a little bit more difficult. Decks which don't play a ton of single prize Pokemon, but Iron Hands can really take full advantage of that. But why is it underperforming? Why is Chien-Pao not doing as well as a lot of people have thought about? Well, there's a ton of Gardevoir and Zard. They're one of the strongest decks around the format. In the air has a good matchup into it, right? Well, that's absolutely true. Iron Hands does often and makes these single prize Pokemon into 2 prizes, which is very, very powerful, very, very strong. But by putting loads of pieces for the Iron Hands, you're getting rid of the likes of your Greninja play. Your Greninja play is really strong because it gets 2 KOs. Whereas if you're getting a Charizard deck or a Gardevoir deck, you're getting rid of a Charmander, a Charmeleon, a Ralts, or a Curlier. Whereas with Greninja plays, you're getting rid of 2 Curliers or 2 Charmanders, which is a much, much larger threat. And Iron Hands can take a ton to set up. You might even set up at least a turn or 2 late. By that time, Charizard and Gardevoir have already set up. Yes, I know we're in a bit of a faster format and these decks are a little bit slower, but they are still playing lots of cards, which makes them really outpace and much more very, very quicker. And it definitely does get outpaced by other 2 prize decks. Miraidon has now become a tier 1 archetype. Miraidon is doing incredibly well right now in this format time, and it can absolutely outpace. Miraidon already, you had a pretty bad matchup into it. I think it comes a little bit worse. They also use Iron Hands, so they can get rid of one of your Frigibacks, instead of going to an uneven prize trade, they can get a 2 prizer that way very, very quickly. I do think that's a real issue, but why Chien-Pao is underperforming. You're getting rid of a ton of its consistency cards, getting rid of a ton of your basically your destructive cards like your cross switches and even boss's orders, and swapping it to be Iron Bundle and the likes of Escape Rope or Countercatcher. I think this deck is just becoming a little bit more slower, a little bit more clunkier by trying to catch up by keeping Iron Hands be the best way to play it. Now, if we just look at the top 16 list here, this was Ian Robb's top 16, and he even posted on Twitter that he would never play this deck again. So inconsistent, not a fun deck to play with it. And you can see here that this was probably the best way to how he plays Chien-Pao. It has an Iron Hands, it does play the cross switcher, which I still really like, having an option to play Greninja, but it plays a 9-1 split of energy. I really like the 9-2 split because say you price Lightning Energy, well, this Iron Hands is now worthless. Sorry about that. We also still play the Iona, which is really good in the early game to try and like refresh your hand, as well as also in the late game for a little bit of disruption. But you can see here there's no counter catcher. The only discussed is still Cross Switcher. Pokestop is still the best stadium card to play here. Plays a 2-1 split of the Frigid back, still 2 back Excalibur. I think this is a very, very powerful, very strong deck, but it is not performing as well as we might possibly think. Just look at this matchups. I'm sorry, but this is the best way to describe about why Chien-Pao is kind of underperforming. It has absolutely no positive win rates. The only positive win rate it has is Lost Zone Box, because well, Iron House can really help in that one, and the other category, but being nearly 56%. But if you look at the rest of it, they are just so much worse than we might possibly think about. There is a ton of really bad matchup-wise, like some Mew, Roy Moon, Charizard, Gardevoir, Miraidon. All these decks which you actually had a decent matchup going into one, well, obviously bar Roy Moon because it's a brand new archetype. Going into it, it's really, really poor. You're not doing it as well as you might possibly do. Yes, I know this is on Limitless Online, so it's not going to be like the best guarantee sort of way of kind of understanding about it. But the matchup wise become a lot more tough. Looks like the rise of Snorlax Stool. It became a lot more difficult to kind of deal with that one. You're not playing as much switching cards, and if they just chuck in a Snorlax there, you just pay them one of your Pokemon there, and it gets trapped in the active. Well, you can't really move. Like with Fusion Mew, it's very, very difficult matchup anyway, but now it's become a ton of more difficult. I think it's become a lot more difficult matchup, a lot more wide and broader meta. Becomes a lot more difficult for Chien-Pao to really shine and really catch up. It's already a lot more slow, a lot more inconsistent at times. And just looking at the matchup wise overall, you can really tell and really see. So what exactly does need to change to make Chien-Pao back in its glory days, make it back to get a top 8 placement? Well, should we just remove hands? If we go back to the Greninja plays, does it add to it? Because adding the Iron Hands, does it cut the consistency? We're playing less water energies. We're playing less sort of guaranteed searching cards by adding in an Iron Hand. So do we get rid of that? Do we go back to support? Do we go back to adding like V-Stars or at change of a stadium? Do we need to add that into it one? Because a lot of Chien-Pao decks right now, some of them did play that Rotom, which had the V-Star into it one, the V-Star, or potentially the likes of Luminion. But do we go back to having the Arceus, the Palkia, which I think is really, really strong? Do we change the stadium? Do we go back to Skaters Park, or potentially even Lost City? Different ways around how to play it. Or is it the most common question here? Is it not time for Chien-Pao? Is it time for us to put the deck down, wait for the meta change, and then bring it back up? We know we could be getting Waking Wade in next sort of a couple months' time, a brand new card which is focused in the water types. So potentially that could be a way of how we're going to utilize Chien-Pao. Could it come back this way? I do think that Chien-Pao right now needs quite a bit of change to actually bounce back to perform well in the metagame. So what I've kind of thought about, is this the best way to play it? This is a list which I've been tinkering around with. I think potentially could do pretty well as well. Focusing a little bit less on your Chien-Pao, but you still have the heavy ball, but going back to Palkia. Palkia is an incredibly good sort of attacking option as well. Doing 260 damage is still very, very powerful. KOing nearly most of the threats right now in the metagame. I also love Star Portal, a way for you to accelerate energies if you can't find your superior ender retrieval. Going back to the Lost City, trying to play 2 copies of that one. I know Past Speak isn't as strong, but going back to playing the Greninja play, this is just a very, very good inclusion, this one. Going back to more of a supporter-based sort of build, and the Bibarel as well for that drawy sort of factor. I think this list could definitely work a lot stronger. Now, we are going to form out Charlie. You play still a ton of item cards. Well, a lot of the top decks are still playing Pokestop, so you still get that value for it if you're against certain archetypes as well. Going back to 9 water energies, I just think this list could potentially be the saving grace for Chien-Pao. It helps with this matchup-wise as well. Yes, I know Palkia is lightning weak, there's Miraidon, but Palkia is still very, very good in Miraidon at times, but utilizing this big, massive trade off against them. I really like the Canceling Cloak to help get rid of the mana feeds, because there are still a couple mana feeds out in there, and the Greninja play plus Lost City is very, very devastating and can destroy a ton of sort of supporting Pokemon, like getting rid of these Curlers and Charmanders. Potentially, your opponent could be 2 or 3 less attackers throughout the whole game. I do think Chien-Pao, this might be the best way to play it, and the only way this deck can really bounce back. So just looking ahead, can Chien-Pao bounce back? Is it strong without Iron Hand? But yes, I do think it can bounce back. I think potentially could be stronger without Iron Hands. We've seen this happen before. We've seen some archetypes have a big U-turn sort of change mid-meta game. I think the biggest example of that one is Charizard. Charizard already was a tier 1 sort of tier 2 deck, but I think after the last couple of weeks, we've really seen that Charizard has kind of bounced back to be one of the strongest decks right now in the meta game. A more important question I want to ask about with Chien-Pao, is the meta too wide for it to survive? With a ton of Iron Valium, with a ton of bench sniping damage or capability. Still lost box around there. Is it just too wide? Can it just not survive keeping its Frigibaxes out there for a couple turns before they can turn into that Excalibur? It is still my favorite deck in a while. I still love Chien-Pao. I still have so much fun playing it. I still love it when you get that Iron Hands go do and get an extra 2 prices that way as well. But I do think that Chien-Pao might just have to put a little bit of a back burner right now and evolve and change up to it. I think again now Palkia could be a much stronger version player. I think potentially even that Lost City, going back to Greninja play, it really helps in so many more matchup wise because evolution decks are the best they've ever been right now. But having that Greninja Lost City pressure can really help you push that Chien-Pao to be one of the strongest decks right now in the metagame. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Doing a little bit talking about Chien-Pao. It is a little bit Christmassy because obviously there is a ice cat or ferret with swords as well. I think it could do very, very well right now. I think it will bounce back eventually. I love the deck as well. Maybe Iron Hands is just not overperforming as much as it should do. It's very much underperforming. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please make sure to like and subscribe, and hope you have an amazing Christmas. See you guys soon.